Hi, welcome to this tutorial. So in this tutorial, we are going to be looking at printing odd numbers in JavaScript. So it's going to be a complete tutorial. Let's look at the different ways to print odd numbers in JavaScript. We'll be using the modulus operator. I'll tell you what that is. We'll be using that to figure out whether a number is an odd number or not. And then we'll also be looking at different problem statements like printing odd numbers within a range, printing odd numbers within a user given range, or printing odd numbers from an array of numbers, things like that. Okay, and we'll be solving them one by one. Alright, so let's get started, shall we? Alright then, so to start with, we are going to be printing odd numbers within a range like this. Alright, so in this example, we'll find out the list of numbers within the given linear range. So linear range is basically, for example, if I say the range ends at 100, then what I want is I want to find all the odd numbers from 0 to 100, for example. Okay, so you can make this range anything you want, bigger or smaller. All right, to start with, what we're going to do is we're going to create an index. It's going to create a HTML skeleton. So we already have this right here. I have my JavaScript practice folder with my index.html and my script.js. Now this has a basic HTML skeleton in here to start with, and we've connected to our script.js by using the script. All of that has been done. Now let's create our headings. All right. So to start with, we need a heading in here. So basically, I'm going to say print odd numbers within the given range like this. Okay, so this is what I'm going to start with, and afterwards I'm going to ask my user for the range within which we want the printing to happen. So please enter the range in the box below like this. Alright, so that's the next one, and then let's see. So input type is equal to text, ID is equal to range. Now I'll tell you what this is exactly. So basically we are asking for the range, right? So you need somewhere the range can be placed. So this is where I'm going to place the range. I'm going to give it a unique ID of range so that I can receive it in my script, and it can be of type text. That's fine. You can make it of type number, but we can parse it later on in our JavaScript, so that's completely fine. And finally, let's create a button of ID enter. All right, so basically when we press on this particular button, the value inside of this input is going to be taken up by our script file. All right, so now that I've shown that, let's just show it. And also actually I want to end this off with another thing right here, this HTML. So I'm going to have another h2 that says the odd numbers within the range are like this, and I'm going to have an empty div element to start with of ID nums. Alright, and I'm going to populate this div element with multiple elements in here, so multiple paragraphs or something that print out all of the odd numbers. Okay, so I'm going to leave this empty. I'm going to populate it later on by using my JavaScript. So I'm basically making it dynamic by using JavaScript. Alright, so let's go to our script file. Let's save everything and go to our script file to start with. Now see, we have a bunch of elements in here. So we have this input box, we have this ID, we have this div element, and these have unique IDs because I want to manipulate them by using JavaScript. So I'm going to first receive or extract all of these elements in JavaScript, right? So let's just do that to start with. I'm going to be using the document.getElementById method because I've just created unique IDs for each of these, and I can just use that. Right, so I've received a range, and I'm going to copy and paste this 3 times so that I can change the value with what I need. So the next one is the enter button, and the next one is your nums div element, remember? So we created all 3 of those. I'm just going to receive them. And then let's create a variable r and assign it a starting value of 0. Okay, so later down the line, what we'll do is we'll assign the range value. So this is going to contain the range value that was inputted by your user. Okay, so it's going to contain that. So to start with, it's going to be 0. Let's also create an array to start with, it's going to be an empty array, but let's create an array called odd numbers, and we'll be inserting the odd numbers that we extract from the range in this particular array so we can later print them out. Alright, so next let's create a click event listener for our enter button. So once the user has entered something and they press on my enter button, I want the enter button to fire out this event listener, and I want the odd numbers to be extracted and printed out immediately. Alright, so let's just do that. So we already got enter, so enter.add event listener. It's gonna be a click event listener, and I'm gonna keep this simple, and I'm going to create an anonymous arrow function right here. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to check if it has already been printed, as in, for example, the user might be trying to enter a second range. For example, they might have already used the app and they might have already printed something out. So that range is still there and the development is still there. In that case, we have to clear everything out before we print the new thing. So I'm going to check if the odd numbers array that we just created, right? I'm going to check if the length of that array is greater than 0, which means something was already printed that. In that case, we are going to reset the array and we are going to remove the parent elements, child elements actually. Okay, but before we do this though, I would like to show you what happens in the rest of it, because right now you wouldn't understand this otherwise. Alright, so let's just assume that we finished the code for already printed. Okay, so once that's done, what we need to do is we need to do 3 things. Okay, so to start with, we need to get the range, right, within the event listener, actually, otherwise it wouldn't work properly. So get the range. So get your R and parse int of the value of range. See, once you press on the enter button, we are assuming that the range element, right, the range element has some value in it. Okay, so we are assuming that. So we are first getting that because it's going to be in the form of a string. We are first getting that and we are parsing it. Okay, we are parsing it and we are parsing it with a value of 10, so it's decimal, and it's obviously going to be an integer because we're using parse int. Alright, so first of all, let's get the value in R, and then I'm going to create a variable j and assign it a value of 0. Now I'm going to start with this because this is going to be the indices for our odd numbers array. So every time I add a new value in this odd numbers, I'm going to increment the value of j actually, so that's why. Alright, so next let's do this. For let I is equal to 1, I'm going to start with 1 because, unlike the other for loops, I'm starting with 1 because, well, numbers start with 1, right? So if you give a range, we are actually looking for 1 to that particular range and not otherwise. Alright, so that's why. And I is less than or equal to R because we want to include the range as well. And then I++ incremented for every iteration. And now to check if a number is odd number or not, we need to use the modulus method. So as you know, the modulus method actually finds the remainder, right? So for example, if to start with, your number is 1. So 1 modulus 2 is actually 1 because 1 divided by 2 is 0, the quotient is 0, but the remainder is 1. Similarly, if you go for 2, now it's 0. Well, why is that? Because 2 divided by 2 is 1, so there's no remainder. But if you go for 3, again you'll get 1. So from here, you can see that every time the number is an even number, it's perfectly divided by 2. So you're getting a remainder of 0, but every time the number is an odd number, it's not divided by 2, so you're getting a remainder of 1. So you could easily check if a number is odd or not by this. So if it's not equal to 0, or you can also give the condition as if it's equal to 1, both of those conditions would work. In that case, we have ourselves a odd number and we can add that to j. So since your array indices start from 0, that's why I'm making it odd numbers of j like this. Okay. Alright, so just assign the value of I to it and increment the value of j. So every time you encounter a odd number, it's going to add that to the next element in the array, right? And it's going to print it out like that. Alright, so now our odd numbers is going to have everything we need. And finally, what we need to do is print the numbers. Now, this is why I didn't put this in first, because, you know, I want to show you how I print out the numbers. So basically, I'm going to be using the for each method, which iterates through each element of the array. So it's an easy way of looping through the array. So you can use your for loop for this as well, but with for each, you save a little bit of time. Alright, so in your odd numbers array, let's use the for each, and every time there's an iteration, we are getting that particular element in the particular array, right? So every time I'm going to place that into O. So let's say your odd numbers array has something like this. For example, let's say it has 1, 3, 5 and 7, because 7 and 9, okay, because my range is 10, so it has 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9. So for the first iteration, the value of O would be 1. The second iteration value of O would be 3, and then 5, and then 7 and 9. Okay, so that's how it's going to be. Alright, so every time it's going to be like that. Now, what we're going to do is we are going to create a paragraph element, because if you remember, we created a div element in here, but I for one need each of my odd numbers to be printed out in one particular line, and the best way of doing that is by creating paragraphs, and each paragraph is going to have one of the numbers. So you can use the document.createElement method to create a paragraph element. So within quotes, just place P to indicate that you want a paragraph element created, and we are assigning to that to this particular variable, so we can add this to our main div element. Okay, so you can just add it at the end like that. So how would you do that? Well, before you do that, you have to first assign the value of O. Remember, the O, each time each element in the array is going to be inside of O for every iteration. So first assign that to your inner text of that newly created paragraph element, and finally get the nums div element and use the append child, okay, which basically means that you're appending this particular child that you created, because paragraphs are div element's children, right? So you're going to append it to the end of it. So first, this is going to be at the start, the next is going to be 3, and then we are going to have 5, and so on and so forth. Alright, so we are going to append it like that. So that's pretty much it. And finally, let's make the value of range as nothing again, so that, you know, immediately after you press on the enter button, the value inside of this goes back to empty, so you can enter a new range if you'd like. So now that you know, this is how we're doing it. So we're appending the child, we're creating a paragraph by using create element for every iteration, and then we're appending it to our div element. So this is how it works for the start. But after it's done, after everything is done, how do you reset everything? Well, resetting this array is very simple, right? So all you have to do in here is just get your odd numbers and make it an empty array again. So that's resetting your array. So it'll be empty, and you can start over from this. But you can't just leave things as it is, because right now you have div elements with multiple paragraph elements, and they have their own values. You want to remove all of that and make your div element an empty div element again. Otherwise you can't start over, right? Otherwise what would happen is it'll just append it after the previous output. You don't want that. Alright, so what you're going to do is while. You're going to use while. You're going to check if your nums div element has any child nodes. You can use the has child nodes method. So if it returns true, that means it still has child nodes. It means it still has some paragraph in it. If that's the case, then you're going to remove the first child. Okay, so you're going to keep removing every first child. So nums.remove child, and inside of it the value is going to be the first child. You can remove the first child, you can remove the last child, any of those things, but I'm removing the first child. Okay, so every time I'm going to remove the first child, and until this value, this has child nodes value, returns false. If it returns false, it will come out of this while loop, which means our div element is now an empty div element, just like it was in the start. Okay, so this is the entire program. It's a very simple program actually. Right, so let's just save everything and look at our output. So I have the live server plugin in here. You can just search for it and you can install it, and with that I can just right click and open the live server like this. Alrighty then, see, we have everything. We have our title. It says please enter the range, and let's say my range is just 10 to start with, and if I press on enter, see, I'm getting 1, 3, 5, 7 and 9, and this has disappeared completely. And the next time, let's say I press 100 and I press enter again, see, it was completely removed, and we don't have 1, 2, 1, 3, 5, 7, 9 and then again 1, 3. No, the last one was completely removed, and we're getting a new range like this. Now you can properly see this if I give a smaller numbers. If I make my range as 20 now, see, you'll see that it just gives from 1 to 19 and the rest of it has been removed. Okay, so perfect, it works perfectly. So that's our first method. So now that we've seen this, let's look at the next method. So now we are going to try to do things within a user given range. It's not going to have much of a difference. All we're going to do is we are going to have two input boxes to give two parts of the ranges like this. Okay, so we have two input boxes. Let's receive both of these input boxes in here. So let range and range. So it's going to be range 1, range 2. This is going to be range 1 and range 2. Okay, so we are getting that, and in here too we're going to have R1 and R2 for both of the ranges, and it's all going to be 0 to start with. Okay, and we're still going to have the same odd numbers array because it's got to be the same thing, and we're going to have the enter button, we're going to have the div element, nums div element, all of that. And when you press on it, what happens? Well, the same thing. You reset the array, you remove all the child nodes of nums, and in here you're going to, after that, you're going to get both of the ranges like this. In R1 and in R2, it's going to be range 1 and range 2 like this. Alright, this is where the change happens. So it's going to start with R1. So let I is equal to R1. I is less than or equal to R2, okay, and the rest of it is going to be the same. Similarly, these are going to be the same because we are just printing out, and in here we're going to reset both of the ranges. So range 1 dot value and range 2 dot value as well. So it was quite simple, did you notice? So now finally, let's go look at this. There you go. Please enter the range in the box below. So you can just say, I want this to be between 10 and 20 like this. Press enter. Both of these has disappeared, and it's just 11, 13, 15, 17 and 19. Now if you give from 1 to 15 like this and press enter, see, it goes from 1 to 15. Simple as that. Alright, so there you go. So we've looked at two examples to print the array. And similarly, you can, just not get any of these things, and you can just print arrays from within an array in itself as well. So I'll just show you how to do that. So it's very simple to do. All you have to do is you have an array in here. Let's just have within the array R like this. Alright, and in here let's get our array. So let's say we have a nums. Okay, sorry about this. What happened is I still want nums. I still need nums. But let's say let array is equal to, let's say it has 1, 4, 3, 67, 3, not multiple 3s. Let's have 5, 2, 8, 6, 9, 10. 98, 99, 100, some random values in here. Okay, and let's say we've gotten our nums, and we still need our odd numbers because we're going to extract the numbers. Or on the other hand, every time you get it, you can just create a new element. So we can actually do that as well. Alright, so when you press on the enter button, you're going to see if it already is present. In that case, you're going to reset everything. If it's not present, then what you're going to do is let j be 0. In here, I would be equal to 0, but it'll be less than or equal to the array that you have, right? It'll be less than or equal to the length of the array because we're going to iterate through the length of this array. and every time we are going to go and look at array of I, okay, the value inside of array of I, we are going to do a modulus on that when we're going to find the value. And if it's an odd element, then I want that placed inside of my odd numbers j and increment j like this. And immediately after you place it, what I would be doing is I would be creating a new one like this, and I'd be appending it. So I'm going to take all of that and I'm going to place this in here, so I can just remove this and save a bit of space in here. Okay, so if I find an odd element, I'll create a new paragraph element and change its inner text to odd numbers. Actually, I don't need my array at all. In that case, I'll just get array of I. I'll just place it inside of array of I just like that, and I'll just append that to my nums. Simple as that, right? So simply what's happening in here is I don't need this either. Simply what's happening in here is we have an array, we have our nums development. Every time you press on the button, what you're getting is you're running a for loop. It's running through the entire length of the array, and if that particular element is an odd number, we are creating a new paragraph element, we are appending that to our nums, and it goes like that. So if you look at the output right now, let me press enter. Alright, sorry, what has to happen is we have no odd numbers in here, so let's just remove this, otherwise we're getting an error. Alright, so now let's go and refresh and press enter. There you go. So it gets 135,999 and undefined. Why did we get an undefined at the end? Oops, there is the mistake. Alright, so array, it only goes from 0 to array length -1. So it has to be less than and not less than or equal to. So now you're getting all of the numbers in the order that you created them in. Just the odd numbers. So that's it for this particular tutorial. We looked at 3 different ways of extracting your odd numbers from different ranges and your arrays. So I really hope you liked the tutorial. If you liked it, please subscribe, please press on the like button, and when you subscribe, please press the bell button so you get notifications when I post a new video. I'll be posting a lot of videos. I'll actually post every day, and a lot of the videos are going to be like this, where I answer topics and then I answer questions, and then I also create small applications and things like that. So if you have any suggestions for new videos, please ask them, and if you have any doubts, please ask them in the comments. I'll try my best to answer them. So I really hope you like the video. Thank you. I'll see you in the next tutorial.